RFK Jr. went on Bill Maher's Club Random podcast, and it was a wild ride. So I think it was Mediaite that covered it and said, like, Bill Maher and RFK have intense, passionate debate over vaccines. And I was a little surprised when I read that because Bill Maher is an anti-vaxxer in his own respect. And so I was like, well, I thought they kind of agree on the issue. I thought it'd be like they jack each other off the whole time. But it turned out I was half right because when I listened to the whole thing, and the bottom line is he pushes back on him slightly, but really not much. It's not like he's representing a pro-vaccine position. He's basically like, look, I'm skeptical of some vaccines, and you seem to be against all vaccines. Like, that's basically the gist of the disagreement and the gist of the argument. So it's really nothing to write home about. In fact, I think they're both wrong on the topic. But at least there was a little bit of conflict there, and they get into it just a touch. You can go and watch that portion if you'd like. That's not what we're going to talk about here. We've already been through the lie of vaccines cause autism a million times, and we don't need to dive into it again. But there were a few parts I wanted to show you. So we'll get to their fawning love and adoration for capitalism in just a second. Both of these men of the left, just love them some free markets. But first, this part pissed me off massively. Because this is one of those talking points that's like super popular online, but it's just one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Just incredibly incorrect in every imaginable way. In fact, the exact opposite is true. But a lot of people believe this with all their heart and like proudly scream it through a megaphone. So here we go.
They talk about Ukraine, the Mexican border. See, this is something I also agree with you with. He said pharmaceutical drugs were responsible for the rise of mass shootings in America.
Yeah, I didn't actually say that.
I'm sure you didn't.
No.
But the general...
I said it should be looked at.
It should, and it's... you know what? I don't even have to look at it. It is part of the issue.
Yeah.
The gun issue is a number of things. If people could wrap their head around more than one thing at once, yes, it's about too many guns and the Second Amendment. It's also about violence in movies and TV shows and seeing every fucking...
or how about video games?
And video games.
Yeah.
With having a 12-year-old...
The confidence with which they say stuff that has been studied and proven untrue is astonishing to me. There's been a million studies on do violent video games cause mass shootings, and the answer is unequivocally, without a doubt, no. There's other countries that have just as many violent video games as we do, and they don't have the mass shootings. Stop making this argument. This is a dumb argument. This is like, you know, your idiot uncle at Thanksgiving shits out a dumbass idea he made up that he thought is brilliant, and you immediately Google search it, and you're like, oh, it turns out that that's factually wrong, and there's already been 17 scientists that looked into it. For the love of God, stop saying that violent movies or violent video games cause mass shootings. Everybody knows... If you're sitting there watching a violent movie, this is a movie. Turns out this is not real. Oh, shocking. Video games do not cause mass shootings. Repeat after me. Video games do not cause mass shootings, even if there's mass shootings in the video game. Have I been clear enough?
See every issue solved by way of a gun. No, that has no effect on it. And yes, the kids are on fucking drugs. They're on Prozac. Is that the main one that... But they're all on sort of these pharmaceutical...
There's been lawsuits. So the Columbine lawsuit, which was settled, there was 5 kids who sued because, the shooter was on SSRIs.
Guys, let me walk you through something. So let's say you have a mass shooter. In many instances, the mass shooter shows signs before they become a mass shooter that, something's a little off. They're psychologically not quite there, right? And in some instances, it might be anxiety, it might be PTSD, it might be depression, it might be any of a number. It might be bipolar disorder, it might be schizophrenia. And these people aren't inherently violent, but some of them who happen to have these conditions are violent, right? And so somebody has, let's say, severe depression, and they're showing signs they're not quite there, and they might be violent against others. What do you do in that scenario? Well, one of the things you do is you take them to an expert, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, a doctor, a physician, and in many instances, it's like, yeah, they get prescribed Prozac or Lexapro or any of a number of antidepressants, right? And then, I don't know if you know how these pills work. When you take them, what they do is mess with your brain chemistry in a positive way to make you less depressed, less violent, and have less negative emotions. That's what they do. That's the whole point of what they do. So with some of these people who do these mass shootings, it's not that they start taking the pills and then they become violent. It's that they start taking the pills and then oftentimes they stop, they crash, they withdraw, they go back to being crazy, and then they do a mass shooting. So, and they go on to cite as 23% of the shooters are on, SSRIs, these antidepressant drugs. And it's like, I could flip this back on them and say, oh my goodness. So about 80% of the shooters are not on SSRIs? Well, we better go give them SSRIs to make sure they don't do a mass shooting. And that's not even far off from like what the percentage of the population is that takes SSRIs. It's almost like representative of what the population is that takes SSRIs. There is no connection whatsoever. No connection at all. God, it's a talking point that drives me absolutely crazy because it's the exact opposite of the truth. A lot of these people who become shooters, if they have taken SSRIs, it make them less likely to be a shooter. Have they never even had a conversation with anybody who's been on antidepressants? This is even something that Jordan Peterson talks about and admits. That, yeah, because he was a clinical psychologist. I work with people. Sometimes, not every time, but sometimes you give them SSRIs and it is an absolute lifesaver. It's a lifesaver. Now, I'm willing to admit it's a mixed picture. Some people it doesn't work, or some people the first pill they try doesn't work, the second one they try doesn't work, and they have to, go to a specific one which impacts your brain chemistry in a specific way that helps them specifically, right? Sometimes that's the case. But any expert, any scientist, any doctor, anybody who has any idea what the hell they're talking about on this issue will tell you that SSRIs would more likely help these people and make it less likely that they do a shooting. So just so you know, this isn't just me giving my opinion, right? Post falsely links antidepressant use to school shootings. So this claim was even more idiotic than what these two guys are saying, but somebody had claimed online 90% of school shootings linked to antidepressants. A March 30 Instagram post features a screenshot of a 2012 article written by conservative journalist Jerome Corsi. PsychMed's linked to 90% of school shootings, reads the article headline. The body of the article says some 90% of school shootings over more than a decade have been linked to a widely prescribed type of antidepressant, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. The post garnered more than 1,000 likes in less than 2 weeks. Our rating is false. Researchers have not found any link between antidepressants and school shootings. Available studies suggest a minority of school shooters were prescribed medication prior to committing their crimes. And by the way, like I said, in many of these instances, these are not the kinds of people who are keen to following a schedule and taking their drugs, taking their prescription medicine. So a lot of them are prescribed, they don't even take it, and then they do the mass shooting, and it's blamed on the pills. The shooter who killed 3 children and 3 staff members at a Nashville elementary school on March 27th was being treated for an emotional disorder before the attack, according to local police. This revelation led some social media users to blame mental illness, even medication, for school shootings. The post shared on Instagram focuses on SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, a commonly prescribed type of antidepressant used to treat depression and anxiety disorders. But Dr. Ray Gurgis, an associate professor of clinical psychiatry at the Columbia University Department of Psychiatry and the lead researcher of a 2022 study on mass murders, told USA Today that there's no evidence of a link between medication and shooting. SSRIs and psych meds in general are not responsible for mass shootings or violence in any way. Also not responsible, by the way, video games. Also not responsible, violent movies. Gurgis said in an email, not only are a small minority of mass shooters taking therapeutic doses of these medications at the time of the mass shootings, but these psych meds have specific anti-violence properties. Specific anti-violence properties, because if you know anything about medicine and anything about brain chemistry, it turns out when you release a little more dopamine in your brain, or you release a little more serotonin in your brain, you are much less likely to be violent. This is so idiotic. It's like when idiots back in the 90s, these conservatives would be like, these kids are violent because they're smoking the marijuana. It's like, do you have any idea how dumb that sounds to anybody who smoked marijuana? Do you have any idea how dumb that sounds? Even somebody like me who doesn't like marijuana, the negative feeling I get on it is a paranoia. It doesn't make me violent. It makes me want to run away from the world and hide and curl up in a fetal position. This is just as dumb as that is. Guys, don't fall for this idiotic point. God, it triggers me so much you have no idea. What that means is that if a mass murder happens to be taking a psychiatric medication, the medication was probably incidental, as is nearly all mental illness when present among mass murders. A professor of criminology at Florida State University likewise pushed back on the notion that SSRIs are linked to school shootings. Quote, I'm unaware of any consistent, credible accounts that provide strong evidence regarding the prevalence of SSRI usage in cases involving school shootings or a causal relationship between SSRIs and school shootings. James Densley, the co-founder of the Violence Project, which tracks mass shootings in the U.S., told USA Today that the small percentage of school shooters being prescribed SSRIs isn't proof of a causal link. Quote, all because someone was prescribed an SSRI doesn't mean A, they were taking it, and B, the SSRIs caused them to perpetrate their crime. This is a case of correlation, not causation, and one factor of many in the life histories of mass shooters. And so then they go on to point out that at least at the time, between 2015 and 2018, 13.2% of American adults over the age of 18 had taken antidepressants in the last 30 days. And I believe the number of mass shooters that have it is 23%. That's not too far off from, and you would expect some people with psychological illness also, some of them would be less connected to reality, more likely to resort to those kinds of things, right? And so to have 13% take it and 23% of mass shooters were on the pill, that's not surprising at all. And like I said, like 80% are not on it. So it's not, oh my God, it's not, just a cursory glance at the evidence blows this notion up. And they don't care. This is one of the go-to talking points of like the internet free thinkers. Yeah, the pills cause you, again, go talk to literally anybody who is taking antidepressants. And they will tell you in no uncertain terms, yeah, this is helping me tremendously. Yeah, I was able to get my life back on track. Yeah, I can actually focus on stuff now. Yeah, I don't have a default sense of impending doom and misery anymore. So like I said, it is much more likely that in a lot of these cases, these people were prescribed medication and they weren't taking them. And that's when they went and did the shooting. It turns out pills that are meant to help you usually help you. Now, again, it's not for everybody. Some people, there's like not much of an effect at all, right? But a lot of people there are. And some people, they need to like get the right medication and the right dosage in order to really get those relieving effects. But for the love of God, talk to anybody who's on these things. It's like old white guys doing the definition of bro science and they think they're nailing it. You're not nailing it. It's not violent video games. It's not violent movies. It's not antidepressant pills. The main connecting tissue in all of the mass shootings is what? The easily available guns. That's what it is. And so a rational policy would be about keeping the guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have guns. I know, crazy. Sometimes Occam's razor is the way to go, and that is Occam's razor. Anyway, but I'm not done yet. So that was the part that triggered me the most. But now let's get to these two lefties here describing their love of capitalism.
Yeah, that's good thinking.
After all, we are not communists.
Okay.
I mean, you're a capitalist, right? You believe in capitalism?
Yeah, free markets.
Thank you. That's something a Democrat needs to say. Democrats are too suspect about, first of all, they have an image, especially among immigrants, of they're kind of down on their own country.
Yeah, Bill. That's the problem, dude. That's the problem, Bill Maher. That's the problem, RFK Jr. Democrats don't love free markets enough. They don't love capitalism enough. And they don't suck off the country enough with like blind patriotic fervor. Oh. Literally every elected Democrat, including Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, are one flavor or another of capitalist. With Bernie and AOC, you could say they're social democrats, but that incorporates aspects of capitalism, right? They're not post-capitalist. And then you got people like Joe Biden. Joe Biden talks about how he's a capitalist all the time. And Bill Maher's like, finally, a Democrat says he loves free markets and capitalism. That's like 100% of elected Democrats. And by the way, why would you do that when the system is a mess? The system is a joke. The system is imploding in on itself. You have widespread misery and despair. You have, the average age of death is going down. You have deaths of despair. The opioid epidemic, for example. You have, 70% of the country living paycheck to paycheck? Insane, intense income and wealth inequality? You're like, why, yes, you should talk about how this system is the best system. It's this, you know what it is? It's called the end of history analysis, where it's like, hey, we've already tried all the ideologies and all the concepts and all the philosophies, and hey, where we are right now is just take a snapshot. This is how it's going to be forever. Well, you could do that going back, hundreds of years, thousands of years, to like the Malian Empire and take a snapshot and be like, this is how it's always going to be. Or during the Ottoman Empire, be like, yes, this is how it's going to be forever. We know that the Ottoman system is the best system. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Oh. By the way, again, notice the free-thinking, edgy, independent guys, they will not let go of that one sacred cow, right? The one sacred cow of capitalism is the best, capitalism is great, free markets are amazing, they're just so great. It's the one thing that seems to go totally unquestioned among the free thinkers, the independent-minded folks, the people who do their own research. It's a joke. It's a joke. Anyway, go watch the whole podcast. Enjoy. But suffice to say, I was triggered at many points, to say the least. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.